Story 1. As someone who left healthcare a few years ago, I believe elder care is a widespread issue that will worsen over the next 10 years as people age into needing services and residential care. Many areas in the United States have not yet recovered from the mass exodus of healthcare professionals during the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic. Story 2. It would be cool to see Beetlejuice in the night sky. Story 3. All the Tupperware lids I've lost over the years have formed a mountain of lidless containers in my kitchen that will one day collapse and either crush or drown me. Story 4. The Cascadia subduction zone will move. I am 35 years old. It is more than 320 years into an average cycle of 220 years between major earthquakes over the last 10,000 years. The last major event was around 1701, if I recall correctly. If an event similar to or worse than Fukushima occurs, it would be the largest natural disaster in human history by far. I have seen Federal Emergency Management Agency plans that list more than 6 months of airlift operations into affected areas, because virtually none of the infrastructure is ready to withstand an earthquake of that magnitude. Almost 20% of the city of Seattle is located on a liquefaction zone where the ground can behave like a liquid. It will be catastrophic. Tens of thousands could die within minutes. Local authorities are unprepared. Story 5. Social Security becomes insolvent the year I am supposed to retire. Story 6. A major cyber attack on critical infrastructure will not be resolved quickly and will lead to mass panic. Story 7. The decline of third spaces and social isolation. Bars and pubs have declined because people are drinking less, which is generally a good thing. Malls and movie theaters are experiencing reduced foot traffic due to online shopping and streaming. Even Starbucks and other coffee shops are struggling. At this rate, a day may come soon when the only reasons anyone leaves home are work or the grocery store. Assuming delivery and online orders do not fully take over, that will be a sad day. Story 8. Social media and smartphones are rotting the brains of at least 2 entire generations so far. I think there will be dire consequences, some of which are already being experienced. And yes, I know Reddit is social media. I get the irony of posting this here. Story 9. The housing market has collapsed. In a very sketchy, rundown area here, a small old house now costs £500,000. Story 10. Streaming networks. Eventually people will get tired of paying for so many different subscriptions and of the constant price increases, and the whole system will collapse. I am not sure what will replace it, but it has to happen soon. Story 11. Environmental collapse is caused by the loss of the habitats of species, declines in pollinators, and reductions in biodiversity. Since 1970, global vertebrate populations have declined by 73%. Story 12. It is hard to say. Many have already exploded. Society is exhausted and numb, so more bombs may go off, but the question is how much people will still care. Story 13. I have gone 5 years without soiling my pants. Not even a skid mark. I feel like I am just tempting fate at this point. Story 14. Levee breakage and mass flooding along the Mississippi River due to an earthquake on the New Madrid Fault. Levees have been built higher and higher along the Mississippi River to prevent flooding. When the river floods, it deposits sediment onto the floodplains. Preventing flooding causes this sediment to accumulate on the riverbed. So over time the riverbed rises and the water level increases. Higher water levels lead to taller levees, which further prevent flooding, causing more sediment buildup and additional rises in water level. The New Madrid Fault runs along and through the Mississippi River where Tennessee, Missouri, and Arkansas meet. It is one of the most potentially powerful faults in North America and is located within a tectonic plate rather than at a plate boundary. Intraplate earthquakes release more seismic energy than interplate earthquakes of the same magnitude, so they have a larger effect on structures and landforms. These faults rarely produce earthquakes, so people in their area are often unprepared and buildings are not strengthened for seismic events. Tension can quietly build for decades and then produce a very large quake. It is hard to compare strictly by magnitude, but for example, the 1906 San Francisco earthquake could be felt across an area of about 6,000 square miles, while the major New Madrid quake in 1812 was felt across more than 1 million square miles. If a period of heavy rain were to bring the river to or near flood stage when a quake occurred, It could cause widespread levee failures, mass flooding, and large-scale loss of life and economic damage in the United States. I think the new Madrid fault will produce a large earthquake again in my lifetime, and I pray we are in the middle of a drought when it happens. Story 15. Water issues. Even without climate change, data centers and artificial intelligence facilities are driving a large increase in water demand, which is likely to have serious consequences. Story 16. Betelgeuse may have already exploded. When the light eventually reaches us, it will be visible to the naked eye even during daytime. Story 17. Student loans affect many people who owe money and cannot pay. Story 18. There are so many issues I could mention regarding sports. The unchecked name, image, and likeness rules in the National Collegiate Athletic Association. Networks blacking out games if you do not subscribe to them. And the outrageous amounts colleges spend on athletics while campus facilities decay and student loan debt is at an all-time high. Sports betting is a major concern. Between networks promoting their own apps, commentators focusing on betting odds, and constant worries about rigging, I think it is only a matter of time before the system collapses. Its effects on individuals, families, and finances will be severe. I predict that sports betting will become the leading addiction contributing to divorce within the next 10 years, overtaking alcohol and drugs. Story 19. I have idiopathic epilepsy. Doctors were never able to determine why my brain behaves as it does, and I worry I will go into status epilepticus and never wake up. During my first episode, one had continuous seizures for 72 hours. They even brought my family in to say goodbye. I have not had any seizures nearly as severe since, but it was a frightening experience. Story 20. The growing wage gap. When the top earners make more in a year than they could spend in 10 years, and the bottom cannot afford rent, it will lead to problems. As it gets worse, pressure will build. Sometime in the next 20 years, we may see a class revolution that ends with wealth rebalancing and new safeguards to prevent a repeat. Part of that will be laws preventing corporate lobbying, bribes, donations, and so on to politicians with severe consequences. Stronger anti-monopoly laws will be needed, and most importantly, higher taxes for the upper echelon, not just on income but on gains in any form. We created a healthy middle class in the mid-20th century by taxing the rich at 90% or more. We need to return to that. Jeff Bezos can live on $7 billion a year, while the middle and lower classes could use $63 billion in support for free education, lower taxes, and social programs. Story 21. People in the United States are fed up with insurance companies and large pharmaceutical companies. Luigi is a small event within the larger context of the future. Story 22. I feel a class war is on the verge of breaking out. To appease the masses, you need bread and circuses. Bread is becoming harder to come by, and the circuses are so regulated they cease to be entertaining. Look at the outrage when Kimmel was cancelled. It returned barely a week later because people were furious. Something is going to give. Story 23. The year 2038 problem with Unix timestamps is essentially a second year 2000 problem. Story 24. World War III. There are too many major powers that dislike each other, and technology is advancing so quickly that any one of them could believe it has the advantage. Story 25. Microplastics are in all of us. We are going to see people in their 50s with Alzheimer's disease. There will not be caregivers or money to care for middle-aged people living with dementia. We will convert former large retail stores into daycare centers where people can leave their loved ones while they work. Story 26. Insurance, especially in high-risk areas, is already failing. Most private home insurers have pulled out of Florida, and the state government is acting as the insurer of last resort. But premiums are simply too low to actually cover the cost of a catastrophic disaster. Eventually, a catastrophic event, such as a Category 5 hurricane, could hit a large city and make rebuilding impossible without substantial federal funding, which is not guaranteed. We could see the abandonment of medium-sized metropolitan areas and possibly even a major city such as Miami or Orlando. Story 27. A declining birth rate will lead to a larger proportion of the population being elderly, and there will not be enough young people to support them. This will cause a collapse of retirement systems and a dramatic increase in demand for medical care. Story 28. The United States dollar is no longer the world's reserve currency. We are well on our way to losing our hegemony. Once we can no longer spend trillions of dollars on invisible jets and robot ninjas, we will be in trouble because we are, at heart, a bunch of fat and lazy idiots. Story 29: Robots and Drones in Warfare. Imagine a scenario in which a cargo container full of suicide drones enters a country's port with pre-planned routes, ready to go, and a container system that allows them to deploy autonomously. They could randomly attack civilians or structures. The potential scenarios unlocked by those new weapon systems are terrifying to consider. Story 30. Bananas are very challenging to mass produce. They are constantly threatened by catastrophic diseases. Story 31. Posting this on my alternate account just in case. Private equity has been in a bubble for decades. Who knows when it will pop, but it will be ugly when it does. Despite what the firms will tell you, it is not smart money. It is a giant capital flow machine. Pensions and endowments poured trillions into chasing an illiquidity premium, and that cash itself became the driver of returns. Add cheap debt, tax tricks, financial engineering, multiple expansion, and market booms, and everyone looks like a genius. The alpha is mostly gone. Net of fees, private equity just tracks the market with more leverage. The smooth returns are typically paper marks, not real market pricing. Since 2021, exits have been clogged, so funds have sold companies back and forth to each other at slightly higher multiples. They are sitting on many zombie software companies bought at extremely high valuations, now underwater and vulnerable when new players using artificial intelligence and so-called vibe coding deliver similar products at a fraction of the development cost. Every fund from 2017 to 2022 was built in a zero-interest rate environment. That world is gone. Private equity looks stable only because drawdowns are hidden. Remove that illusion and it is just levered beta with huge fees. If this bubble bursts, the fallout cuts two ways. Portfolio companies. Most private equity-backed firms are stuffed with debt and were bought at peak prices. They cannot refinance at today's rates, so you will see defaults, layoffs, and fire sales. Many zombie software companies will collapse. There will be widespread layoffs. Limited partners, pensions, and endowment funds are the primary holders of the risk. They have marked these assets far above reality for years. Once write-downs hit, there will be shortfalls in retiree benefits, university budgets, and state spending. Liquidity will tighten and secondary markets will flood with distressed sales. The economy. Credit markets will seize up from defaults. Millions will lose jobs as overlevered roll-ups implode, and confidence in alternative investments as a whole will take a beating. It will not be a 2008-style crash. More like a slow bleed that hollows things out until structural failures occur. It is already happening. Private equity-backed bankruptcies reached record highs in 2024. Over $500 billion bankruptcies last year were private equity-owned. This is not theoretical anymore. The model is already breaking in real time. Examples: Instant Brands, maker of the Instant Pot and Pyrex, was bought by Cornell Capital and later filed for bankruptcy. Creditors say dividend recapitalizations drained it. Mobilium, a telecom analytics company owned by HIG and Audax, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2024. Will Pros, a car parts maker burdened by $1.7 billion in debt, went bankrupt under private equity ownership. Healthcare roll-ups involving physician, dental, and veterinary practices and staffing firms backed by private equity are bleeding out. Costs are up, reimbursements are down, and leverage is killing them. It will be ugly and long-lasting when it happens. Story 32. There are many issues and much will not be measurable. For example, I think artificial intelligence will reach a point of no return that leads to a multitude of problems. I also think overuse of artificial intelligence will reduce critical thinking skills, which are already declining. Artificial intelligence, housing, wage disparity, extremism, bigotry, natural disasters, and so on all feel like they are reaching a boiling point. If I had to choose one, it would be heat. People talk about climate change in the context of melting ice caps and destabilized ecosystems, which is true, but the reality is it is going to get really hot. I have no doubt that in my lifetime we will start having heat days when people are advised to stay inside because it is genuinely too hot to be outdoors. I am so glad I live in an era when a handful of rich people are destroying the planet for a few extra dollars before they die. Really appreciate the effort, guys. Story 33. A coronal mass ejection strong enough to knock out everything. Story 34. As someone on the wrong side of 50, I feel I have lived through disasters and witnessed many predictions that did not come true. My greatest concern is social and cultural collapse. I worry that real life is being slowly removed from daily activities. Social gatherings, walks in nature, live music events, and the sense of wonder about life and its possibilities are being replaced by groupthink fueled by social media, increasing population control and censorship, and the erosion of culture itself. I think what makes us human is being lost. We are being contained and shaped into something unsustainable. Story 35. The collapse of the American economy that the baby boomers built on credit and debt. Story 36. The United States healthcare system is already on the verge of collapse. Thanks to Donald Trump, prices for treatments, insurance, and drugs are increasing, research funding is decreasing, and the dumbing down of public health is rewarded. The decline began with the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic, when the system was first overwhelmed and healthcare workers burned out. There is a cohort in healthcare that insists the pandemic is over. Some clinicians who once masked to protect vulnerable patients now refuse to wear masks except during surgery. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is undermining herd immunity to diseases we have controlled for decades by promoting restrictions on vaccines. The Trump administration drove obstetrician gynecologists and women's clinics out of business by passing anti-women's health laws and cutting funding, forcing entire hospitals to close. Large geographic portions of the United States will soon be without reliable healthcare. In some mid-sized and small cities, even in areas that voted Democratic, people face wait times of up to a year to see specialists. The poor and vulnerable will become ill and die. The working poor and the lower middle class will be driven to disease by overwork, and the middle class will shrink further. The rich, the ruling class, and the oligarchs will hoard healthcare as they hoard other resources. They will be fine. Story 37. Streaming services and paying a subscription for everything, including software licenses, have gone too far. I have already hopped off the Netflix train. I am sick of movies I love or television shows I am halfway through being removed because the service decides so. People do not own anything these days, and it is appalling. Now I go down to my local secondhand video store and stock up on Blu-ray discs of my favorites. No one can take those away from me. Worse, virtual private networks, Photoshop, and AutoCAD are all on monthly or yearly subscriptions. Software licenses mean the software you use every day to run your business can be taken away in an instant because the company decides so. What happened to the good old days when you paid a couple $100s for a copy of Photoshop and it was yours until it no longer ran? At some point, this whole model is going to crumble, and I cannot wait for it. Story 38. The media are supporting fascism. It happened in the 1930s and is happening again. Whether it was the Daily Mail in the 1930s or the algorithm now, it is the same phenomenon, and it will persist until millions of people die to stop it. Story 39. The rich had better start getting really generous soon, or they are in for a world of hurt. The next recession will not be a bunch of kids occupying Wall Street. They have almost gone too far, and I am concerned that the class struggle will turn into a class war. Story 40. United States national debt, artificial intelligence, organized religion, cryptocurrency markets, consumerism and exploitation of workers in the United States, global warming. Story 41. The United States political system is troubled. Money in politics is a cancer that will continue to corrupt politicians. At some point, something has to give. There is only so much people can take when these moneyed interests keep squeezing us to enrich themselves. Story 42. America appears to be on the brink of civil war and collapse. Story 43. A rogue artificial intelligence is only a matter of time. We will eventually develop a system that can code better than humans, and once we reach that point, it is over. If it can improve its own code, it will continuously iterate into something beyond our control and could take over any systems integrated with it. Story 44. I am just going to vaguely gesture at everything around me because shit is absolutely bonkers. Story 45. One possibility is a movement that rejects artificial intelligence and technology on the same scale that the baby boomers rejected the Vietnam War. Young people will lead it and others will follow. Another possibility is a nuclear event that shocks people into working together for a while, similar to the United States after September 11, 2001, or Europe after World War II. Story 46. There is a tree limb hanging over my fence that looks partially rotten. One day it will fall and damage the fence. Story 47. The medical industry. We cannot call it healthcare any longer. Story 48. The negative effects of climate change will increase exponentially. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.